Tell me about how is the state of Florida ranching? Like, what's impacting the state of Florida right now when it comes to ranching? Because I know when a lot of people think of Florida, they think about tourism, but ranching is a really big part of what's happening in the whole ag industry in Florida.
Yeah, ranching in Florida has always been a big deal. I mean, we're one of the top 10 largest cattle ranches uh, in the United States. Florida is. And so we have more green space, you might say, than probably any other industry.
Mm,
So we provide lots of things as ranchers for the state of Florida, including wildlife habitat, um, groundwater opportunities for groundwater reservoirs, and just being able to maintain the natural resources. So Florida cattle ranching right now is really good. And one of the reasons why it's really good is because the total number of cattle in the United States are down. So it's a
mm,
supply and demand. And so our supply is fairly low, probably the lowest it's been in probably 25 years for calves. So it's made our calf crops worth a lot of money. So, from a financial standpoint, right now, uh, cattle business in the state of Florida is really good. If you had to go and think about, well, where's our biggest struggles?
mm-hmm.
Probably our biggest struggles are, just keeping these ranches in existence from the standpoint of we've got uh, developers are always after, the land and want to turn it into what I'll call the last crop and building houses on it. But that's one of our big deals. The other one is just regulatory environment from our government. They can regulate you out of business. But because we have pretty small margins as an industry, and it can be pretty daunting for some of the regulatory environments that we have to live in.
I bet. What are some of those regulatory environments? Because I know a lot about I mean, developing is impacting Florida ranchers because everybody's retiring to Florida, so we're losing farmland. But what about the regulatory things that are kind of impacting ranchers?
Well, anytime that you have you have water on your property,
Mm,
they want to regulate that.
okay.
Whether it's you're down south, it can be canals, it can be wetlands, it could be ponds, keeping cattle in or out, or how do you deal with that, and and including any kind of structures you might want to build, how many cattle you can put out, fertilization, using some of these organic uh, products out of the larger communities like Orlando and Tampa. Those
Hmm.
are all regulated for what we can use them for. So there's just there's anytime we want to build anything or do anything, somebody's going to be telling us what we can or cannot do, whether it's a water management district or zoning departments in the counties or DEP or Army Corps of Engineers. And sometimes when you want to do something to a pond or something and Army Corps gets involved, it can be extremely expensive to satisfy them.
Mm. Yeah, a great example of that, and I mean, you're a little bit north of them, but that's the whole water issues with Lake Okeechobee. I mean, I know that battle's
Yes.
been going on for decades. I mean, are you impacted by that at all? I mean, I know you guys are up in Chiefland.
Yeah, we're not really impacted by the Lake O's problems,
Hmm.
but we've got our own problems. We're primarily groundwater driven here, so the more people that we get, the more groundwater demand the municipalities need, and it's harder for us to get permits. For us to irrigate our corn or our
Mm.
peanuts or our grass for the cattle, whatever it is we might use. So, um, they've got organic phosphate problems down there. We've got nitrogen issues up here. So, any kind of time of fertilization, there's always a give and take. You got to have nitrogen in our soils to grow grass, but too much and it leaches through, so that has to be mitigated.
Now, doesn't Florida have? I mean, most of the soil here, or I guess most of the bedrock, is it most of it limestone, right?
Yeah, up here in North Florida, particularly,
Uh huh.
we live in a very porous type soil, and it's kind of like a lime rock underneath the soil at some point place. It's almost like a sponge. It's just got little
Right.
holes all around in it, so it eventually gets through that lime rock.
Okay. Does that pose any problems with you? I mean, that a farmer in South Florida or even Georgia might have.
I think you can look at it in a couple of different ways. In some ways, it's really good
Mm-hmm.
that we have that because our soil leaches very well. So if it rains, we don't have a lot of mud in most places unless you're in real low areas. Other than that, we're pretty sandy soil, so the water displaces leaves us pretty fast.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that case, it's really good for the cattle, and it doesn't stop us from working.
Gotcha, gotcha. So you're with Quincy Cattle Company, and for the longest time, I kept thinking you guys
Yeah.
were in Quincy, Florida, and then I noticed the E. I was like, okay, Quincy, not the city. So tell us a little bit about Quincy Cattle Company. How do you guys get started, and then what are you guys doing right now?
Well, part of the ranch that we have here is the part that I was raised on and lived a good portion of my life, and I've expanded that over time. And it was a cow calf and farming, and as we expanded it, we went into the backgrounding and preconditioning business, and over the years, it was fairly small, and we expanded and expanded because what we were doing, the rest of the industry needed. A lot of our customers were from all over the United States. They would buy Florida cattle
Hmm.
because we got some really good cattle and we had a lot of them. And so they would buy cattle here. We would go and background those cattle. And when I say that, we would actually take in a calf off the cow, and we would wean that calf, vaccinate, deworm, get that calf ready for its next phase of its life, whether it was going to grass or a feed yard or wherever it was going.
Hmm.
But we also have done lots of things, including we feed out 8 or 10,000 head of cattle a year for consumption here in Florida. We also do heifer development and some bull development. So we've had to be a little bit of everything in the industry to be able to feed our families. But we've been in business about 33 years.
Nice. Okay. I mean, when you try to go all those different routes, is it just kind of a process of trying to stay relevant, trying to figure out what works for you? I mean, because there's a lot of different directions you can go.
Yeah, I mean, I like to always tell my wife, I've kind of invented myself lots of times, and you
Nice.
kind of do that out of necessity.
Hmm.
I mean, if one part of the industry, depending on where we are in the cattle cycle, different things needs to be done. And give a really good example of that is during COVID. We were feeding out a few cattle, and we had some that was really ready. They needed to go. Our packer calls and says, "Hey guys, we can't harvest any more cattle. All the restaurants are shut down." And so I said, "Okay, I got about 26 head of cattle that really need to be harvested. I will pay you a toll fee just to harvest them, and then I will pick up the meat and I'll sell it."
Hmm.
And just happened to be that um, our proteins in our grocery stores got to be pretty scarce, and so we really didn't have much trouble selling that meat. And as time went on, and COVID started to wind down, we were trying to find our footing in the beef business, which was very difficult. But my wife had or her family owned a wayside deli in a couple of locations in Florida, so she was used to buying um, halves and quarters of beef and breaking it down and understanding what yields were and how you had to get rid of everything. So, we started trying to feel our way through that. And the customer base basically says, "Hey guys, this is a fantastic product you got here. Don't go away." And honestly, we thought when COVID was over, our beef sales would be over. That
Mm.
was not our original business. Now, the beef business has got to be a pretty viable thing within Quincy Cattle Company, and it has just been it's been a tough business. It's been uh, challenging, but at the same time, it has been very rewarding.
I bet, yeah. What were some of those challenges? Because I've heard so many farmers and ranchers, like doing this podcast for years, that they pivoted during COVID because they found their customers. So, what were some of those challenges that you guys were facing?
Well, a lot of the challenges in the beef business was, okay, you got a calf here and you have to harvest him. You've got to sell everything.
Hmm.
So, who uses all these items? Okay. So, from every animal that is harvested at, say, an 850-pound carcass, you've got about 150 pounds of what we call 80 trim, which is an 80 lean, 20 fat product. And then you've got a 50 trim, which is about 50% lean, 50%. Well, you got to do something with this. Okay, that's a lot of hamburger meat. So that means you
Hmm.
got to put something in. So you might say out of every animal, you're going to have probably 400 pounds of hamburger meat. So 50% almost of it is going to be hamburger meat. So even though we eat a lot of hamburger meat, when you start killing, you know, a trailer load of cattle, say 30 or 40 head, that's a lot of hamburger meat that somebody has to sell. And it's a lot easier to sell. The steaks, the ribeyes, there's only two ribeyes in an animal. There's only two strip loins. There's only two tenderloins, but there's lots of other stuff. So the challenge is to find a market for all of that, all of that carcass. And so that was a real challenge. And then the challenge that came on top of that is, okay, once you get a harvester starts breaking that down in yield, then you got to make sure that if you've got an 850-pound carcass and you're expecting an 80% yield, if he comes in at 70, you're losing a lot of money. If you can come
Mm.
in at 81 or 82, that's a good thing. So, we've got to be able to track every animal, know how many pounds of each one of these cuts that we should have, and what does that look like as far as the model and how well did you do against your model. So those are all things that is a struggle, for us to overcome.
So I want to go back to something you said earlier. A cow, it reaches like a market weight where they've got to get processed. Like, what happens if, like during COVID, they've got to get processed, but they don't? Like, maybe the butchers are postponed or they're backed up. Like, what kind of an impact does that have on you when you can't process the animal when it reaches that ideal weight?
Well, that's extremely expensive. When you
Mm,
start feeding an animal that is over its ideal weight, first
okay.
of all, his conversion from pounds of feed to pounds of meat goes really down. It takes more pounds of feed to put on a pound of meat, and a lot of that would be fat. So you don't want to overfeed these cattle. If you do, it becomes pretty expensive for every day or two that he's fed, and it goes into weeks. It can be really expensive.
Okay. Yeah, I saw a lot of that. I'm sure you saw that too during kind of the height of COVID, like whether it was pork, chicken, or beef. I mean, these processors were backed up, and the animals weren't like they couldn't get processed, and so there was nothing to do except cull them because I mean there's this huge backlog. It wouldn't be profitable for the farmer, for the processor. So yeah, I mean it sounds like you've got to get it there right on time, right when it's the ideal weight.
Well, that is correct. Although you do have some leeway,
Mm.
we have learned how to feed cattle longer,
Hmm.
so we do a lot better job of that than we maybe did 10 or 15 years ago. And one probably thing we kind of had to learn to do that better during COVID because we had very little harvest opportunities, so
Mm.
we needed to learn how to make sure we could feed those cattle longer without it killing us, even though it still is expensive. Uh, our our yields, excuse me, our cattle per pound of carcass continually kind of goes up. Our cattle get bigger, we feed them a little longer, and we can make up some of this supply by just getting the cattle bigger. You may only have 10 head of cattle, but if you get them 100 pounds bigger, you got quite a bit more meat.
Gotcha. Now, since you're selling kind of more farm to table, do you have a little bit more leeway there? Like you have a little bit more flexibility in terms of them hitting their weight and then processing them?
Oh, maybe a little, but I'm not sure that we really do because our customers are, they're pretty demanding.
Hmm.
So you can sure get too much fat on an animal, and they're going to be unhappy if they come come to you and they buy a piece of meat and it's got more fat on the cover on it than it should, you're going to have an unhappy uh, consumer. So it's still important, because you still got to keep that, you got to keep that housewife and those folks happy.
Yeah, I mean, for since you have more of a direct relationship with your consumer, is it easier to build those relationships and have repeat customers since you can? I mean, since you guys
Uh,
have the farm store, they can come and talk to you, they can meet you, and even talk about it with their friends and family to go support you guys.
Oh, it's been, that has been also a great opportunity that we've
Hmm.
had, that people come and then you'll see the same people lots of times come back and come back and come back, and you can read on our Facebook page, the comments people have about what they did when they came to the ranch, because they came out to the ranch to buy beef and they got to see the cattle, they got to see the meat in the store, they got to visit with the people that actually is producing the products.
Hmm.
So those relationships have been pretty cool. We have a lot of people, and we all kind of have an open door, or what we call an open gate policy. So if somebody wants to come out and see what we do, we're really proud of how we provide the housing and the environment for our cattle to grow.
Hmm.
We're proud of the way we treat them, the way that they're taken care of, and so we're more than willing to let those folks come in and take a tour of our ranch.
Would you say, I know when it comes to, I always tell people buy as local as you can because that money stays in your local economy. The farmer can get more money, the consumer can get something that's fresher, healthier usually. Are there any other benefits that you see as a producer whenever consumers are able to purchase as locally as possible, whether it's beef, produce, or whatever else?
Well, let's just give you an example of our situation.
Hmm.
About 85% of everything that we feed our animals comes within about 20 miles of our ranch. And
Okay, nice.
a lot of it comes from peanut farmers. They got to have a rotational crop for their peanuts, and so that might be corn, or that might be oats, or that might be sorghum. And so we're able to purchase that from them, which in turn they got people, they're paying insurance, they're paying banks, they're paying payroll, and so it's just a bigger group of people that we're touching, and so all of that money spent back in our local communities, including the people that we hire ourselves.
That's awesome. And going off of that, the cattle feed, I want to touch base on this real quick. I know a lot of people that are not really against animal agriculture. They say we're growing a lot of food for cattle, but also cattle and other animals like pigs, like they eat a lot of food that humans can't, like corn silage and a lot of like food byproducts, right?
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, we use, I'll tell you some byproducts that we use. Besides the stuff that's grown here locally, there's a couple of
Hmm.
byproducts that we use. One of them is dry distillers grains. Well, dry distillers grains is a byproduct through the ethanol industry. The ethanol goes for the gas. So
Hmm.
this is a byproduct. It's got pretty high protein in it. So we can feed that to our cattle and use it for a protein source. We also use an energy source that comes here, only about 100 miles from our location. It is a bakery byproduct. So all the bakeries throughout the state gets brought in as a some overflow. And when I say overflow, which I was a little bit surprised at the beginning, it's really a wet dough type product that
Okay.
has been kind of poured out when they were making the breads, and so that gets dehydrated. It could be when I say bakery products, it could be anything from a loaf of bread to donuts to pastries to all kinds of things that's being made. Well, it all gets broken back down and dehydrated and mixed, and then we buy that back. Well, it's pretty high in fats and it's pretty high in sugar, and so we can use that as a part of our energy source that we put back into our cattle feed. So we got lots of byproducts that we can use. And when that you can almost say that our peanut farmers need these crops. That is a rotational crop. It's kind of a byproduct from the peanut industry. They
Hmm.
can't plant peanuts because they got to plant something else. Can't have these products or these peanuts planted simultaneously all the time. So it's almost a byproduct from the peanut industry.
That's cool. Yeah, I love that. Like, there's so much stuff that can happen whenever like different groups are working together. Like the bakery, ethanol. I knew about like there are some breweries that will send their distilled grains to farmers and ranchers,
Yeah,
but I didn't think about ethanol production because I mean that
right.
uses essentially corn. That's
Yep.
cool. Are there any I don't know government benefits to doing that? Like, do either of you guys get write-offs or recognition for kind of converting some of these byproducts to animal feed?
I think the only thing we can do is use it to market our
Mm,
product. We let people know, like this podcast, let people know what we're doing. I mean, because people, like you say, may think, oh yeah, well, the cow's eating a product that we might could be eating. Well, that's just not the case. I mean, it's a
hmm
lot of time it's a byproduct from that. And some of these other products, like oats and stuff like that, we use the whole plant. So I think we get that message out in this environment.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I mean, cows can eat so much. Like ruminants
Oh
can eat
yeah,
so much. I mean, they're eating grass a lot of their life. That's usually just in the field. We don't eat grass, like unless you
that's
really
right.
like grass or really like
That,
salads. But yeah,
that's right.
their diet is really really diverse. And I've got a question. This is kind of on topic, but I've got a friend and his in-laws, they've got like 18, 19 head of cattle. And it's more like a side gig. And they just processed one and they said it's really good. It's very tender, but it's not really fatty. And they're kind of out there. They check on them maybe once a week. What could they do to kind of increase the fat content? Like give them some grain, give them some byproducts like this, or what?
Well, there's a couple of things that usually goes on in these, what I'm going to call a backyard feed yard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, people's feed needs. One of the things is they think that they may be ready when they get to be what they think is mature, and
Mm-hmm.
that could be maybe 1,000 pounds, and that animal really may not really be mature and had enough time to integrate the fat into the muscle, which we call marbling.
Mm-hmm.
That takes some time. So that animal probably needs to be 20 months old, 18 to 24 months.
Okay.
And then he needs to be fed something fairly high in energy because you're going to need some carbohydrates, some starches to really get that marbling in that meat. So their diet and their age can sure have a lot to do with that, and diet particularly. And so you need just when we feed cattle, it's just like a recipe you're buying, you're for a cake. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, when we feed cattle and we know what size they are, their weight, we basically mix a ration that's a recipe that makes sure that he has the right amount of carbohydrates, the right amount of protein, the right amount of vitamins and minerals. So we have this recipe that we're very strict on as we feed these cattle to make sure that we're meeting all their nutritional needs. My guess is those two things that you were describing to get them better would be age and a better, more nutritious, balanced ration for their stage of their life. If it's the last 150 days before harvest, it needs to be pretty high in energy.
Gotcha. Okay. So early on as they're growing, I mean, I guess you've primarily got muscle growing, and then once they get a
That's
little bit
right.
older,
More
then they're storing some of the
protein.
fat.
That's correct. More protein, less energy, more fiber.
So essentially, it sounds just like humans. As we're kids,
It
we can
is.
eat whatever. We're skinny,
That's
we're
right.
lean, and then as
That's
we
right.
get older, we eat the same
That's right.
stuff. We get a little bit fatter. We get a spare
That's
tire
right.
going on.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, that's funny. That's good to know. Kind of going off of food diet or cattle diets and all this stuff. There are so many different types of cattle production. You've got cow calf operations, full on beef productions. You've got feedlots. When it comes to sustainability, I know that's a huge buzzword now. What do you think is the most sustainable form of beef production? Do you think it's one thing versus another? Do you think we need all the components we have now? What are your thoughts on beef and sustainability?
Well, one of the things is, and everybody talks about sustainability, and I just have to throw this out there. One of the things that makes it sustainable is we got to make a living,
Mm,
so we got to be profitable, to keep doing this, so to keep us sustained. But I think all of the things we do, a lot of, I mean, when you take um, cattle ranching or the cattle industry as a whole, it's a expanded business. I mean, you got ranches that it takes a lot of acres per animal.
Hmm.
So you got to have a lot of green space. You got, if you go, they're going to eat, like you said, grass 70% of their life. Even the calves, the cows are going to eat grass 99% of their life. And so it takes a lot of acreage to do that. And so we'll never really be, I don't think you'll never see us look like the chicken or the pork industry because of that. We
Hmm.
can't be that integrated. So I think it takes all of these pieces and parts, from the guy that's raising the calf to the guy that's weaning him and getting him to, and the guy that's putting him on grass and grazing him till he's 700 or 800 pounds, and then you got to have the feedlot that finishes him off. All of these are segments of our industry, I think, that's important to bring the kind of to bring the consumer the kind of product of which they expect on their dinner table. We have a very demanding consumer. We're used to eating good beef in the United States, and so if you go look at the choice product that's out there today versus just 10 or 20 years ago, I mean, we're like 85% choice or better, and people just they want their really high quality beef.
Gotcha. And okay, I'm glad you talked about the consumer being picky because they 100% are. You work with the Florida Cattle Company, right?
We were part of the Florida Cattle Ranchers.
Right, right, yeah, yeah. So you guys were a founding member, right?
We were, and we
So
actually bought that company.
nice. So what was the whole idea behind that? To kind of put kind of Florida ranching on the map?
Yeah, I mean, we wanted to. We really the initial deal was is to use Florida cattle and have those cattle remain here and harvested here and sold back to the consumer here in Florida.
Right. Right. So I love that because something I mean I love to learn more about is food labels. And you
Hmm.
guys, your packaging, it's like Florida cattle ranchers, raised, harvested in Florida. I think that's awesome, especially for people in Florida like wanting to buy locally. But the country of origin label has been outlawed, not outlawed, but it was, I guess, rescinded a couple years ago. But the USDA announced that they're bringing it back selectively to where beef packers, pork, chicken, whatever else, they can selectively add it. Do you think that's going to be a benefit and that a lot of farmers are going to do that in the future?
Well, I think what we will see and what has happened in the past is if we had beef coming in from, say, Argentina,
Hmm.
and say it was a lean product, and we had some fatty product here that we needed to make to make, say, an 80-20 hamburger mix, 80% lean, 20% fat, and you added the U.S. product in there, you could call it the country of origin could be the United States. Okay, we never felt that was very fair.
Hmm.
You to call that when you brought in, when there was product coming from Argentina that was mixed with ours, that was not. So now what the USDA is doing is taking that little loophole out. And so when you see country of origin labeling now, and it says this product is product of the I don't think it's maybe coming to to the law yet, but the rule is going to be pretty soon. But when it says US, the origin was USA, that means everything in there is going to come from the USA. That is a change that I think, and most farmers or ranchers that I know, thinks is a positive.
Right. Yeah. I think it goes into effect. I think maybe the beginning or the middle of January 2025.
That sounds
And
cool.
yeah, I did like a whole research thing on it, and I found a box of blueberries at Walmart, and it says product of USA. But then you go to the website, they were harvested in South America, and then they're just boxed in the United States. But the typical consumer sees product of USA, they're like, oh, these blueberries are from the United States, and that's it. So I'm glad that this label
Very
thing is
much a
actually happening.
miscommunication.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, it's so annoying that that country of origin label law was repealed years ago to
Yeah.
now we have all this miscommunication. Not really miscommunication, but misunderstanding about all these
Yeah.
loopholes and stuff.
Yeah, and maybe a little mismarketing. People.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's accurate. Okay, speaking of laws, I think last month maybe, Governor DeSantis outlawed lab grown meat in the state as a traditional meat consumer or a traditional meat producer, which it's weird to say traditional meat. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I I I guess if we go back to what happened with the dairy industry, because
Mm,
we got some history there.
yeah.
You know, they had milk, and then came along almonds and all kinds of different products, and they called it milk, and it hurt their industry quite a bit. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I always felt like milk was milk. If you wanted to call it almond juice or you wanted to call it chestnut juice or whatever it might be, then that's fine. But milk's milk, you know. And so I feel the same way about a beef, lab grown beef. I don't have a specific um, opinion about that, except, I mean, it's not, it needs to be beef. It needs to be meat. It needs to be grown naturally. It does not need to be lab based. I think that it was a good idea to ban that in the state of Florida, at least until we have a lot more information about
Mm,
it, because I think it's so new until there's just not enough. But the people that I know that have tried it, I even see it was a big deal going on a lot of Impossible burgers and all these kind of things. Now that's kind of fell by the wayside. People that they really like the flavor, texture, and all that kind of stuff of real natural beef or meat of any sort. So I think we need to be careful about those kinds of things. I'm not against new technologies by any means, but we need to be extremely careful, and we need to move in those directions carefully and don't misrepresent it to the consumer.
mm. Yeah, those are good points. I feel like a lot of these, I don't know if they were like Silicon Valley investors or what, but they were all pumping it into hydroponics years ago, and then it
Yes.
went to plant-based meat, and now it's gone to lab-grown meat, and it seems like it's always going to the next thing.
Right.
Yeah, and I remember, I think it was the Impossible CEO. He said, like, right before they launched their product, he was like, "We are going to completely replace the livestock industry." And I was
Yeah.
like, "That's not going to happen." And then now, you go to any grocery store, the plant-based meat section is still just completely open. Like, nobody's buying the products because it was completely mismarketed. They were
Yeah.
marketing it as an animal protein replacement instead of, hey, if you're a vegan or if you're somebody that wants to eat less meat for health reasons or whatever, this is another product for you. Like instead of giving, I felt like they were shoehorning consumers instead of just giving them another option.
Yes. If you know what it is and you know what to expect and you have reasons to for your own reasons to utilize it, correct. But don't try to make it a replacement or try to, like you say, shoehorn it into somebody else's product position on the counter.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's weird. I mean, yeah, I thought it would. I don't know. I think it was weird that they banned it, but I'm glad that some action was done because it's been. I feel like it's been exploding. But yeah, I
Yeah,
would be very. Go
I
ahead.
think that's well. I just think that I think it was a kind of a shot over the bow,
Yeah,
is to
yeah,
say,
hmm,
you got to do this right if you're going to come to Florida.
yeah.
I think that as we go on down the road, things may change, but I think we need to make sure that they know if you come to Florida, you got to do it right.
Hmm. No, that's true. Yeah, I agree. I agree. So you guys have the farm store. You've also got QuincyCattle.com. And it looks like something that I love that you guys are doing. You're working with a lot of other farmers, it looks like, by selling things like honey, pickles, a lot of other products. Like, how did that come to be?
Well, one of the things is that people really liked about our beef was able to know where it came from, to know where it was. And we also, we talked about it earlier in your podcast here about us supporting, our local farmers and our other
Hmm.
local ranchers, buying cattle, buying feed stuff. So, it was just the next right thing to do is to say, okay, if we have customers that want other things, they want honey, let's make sure we get a Florida honey and as local honey as we can. We're doing it. We got an olive oil that we have in over in Alacha, which is about 40 miles from us, guys. Has a great little olive vineyard, and he makes his own olive oil. So all of these things were just really it fell right into play for us. So everything we put in our little store there at the ranch, we try to make it as local, but for sure, fresh from Florida.
Are there any whenever you're trying to get with other farmers, are there any like local regulations you guys have? Because I've been watching Clarkson's Farm, for example, on Amazon, and it's great if you haven't watched it. But he's dealing with something where everything he's selling has to be within like 12 miles of their farm store. Are there any like regulations you guys have for that, similar to that?
I guess that's something that he just wants to do for his marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And I've talked to a lot of different restaurants and grocery stores about local. What is local?
Hmm.
And local's a little bit different to everybody. It might be 12 miles to me or you. It might be within the same county to somebody else. It might be within 100 miles of somebody else. It might be 200 miles. It might be, well, if it's from Florida, it's local. Or if it's from the southeast, it's local. So that can mean
Mm.
something different to everybody. But when you decide what you want to market, then you need to stick with that. If you say, like you said, I want 12 miles, then that's what it needs to be.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, what I think farm stores are awesome. I've been to a lot. There's a lot around here in North Florida. I'm in Panama City, and there was one I went to. Lazy Acre Farms in Mariana. They've got a great little farm store. They sell beef, pork, chicken. For any rancher or even just like a normal farmer with row crops, like what is the process like of opening your own farm store?
Well, first of all, I think if you're going to do that, you need to make sure you have the ability to get the products that you want,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, however that is, whether you raise them or you're purchasing them or whatever. I think that's going to be one of your major hurdles. And of course, then you got to have the permits. You got to make sure that you're state permitted. In Florida, you got to get a permit with the Florida Department of Agriculture, and they come and check you. During the year to make sure you're following their requirements.
Okay.
And depending on how deep you go into that, those requirements can get bigger and bigger. If you're just selling stuff that is, when you get it, the harvester has packaged it under USDA packaging requirements, then there's not a lot that you have to do. But if you open that package and you're going to do something else, that's a whole different animal. That's a whole different set of regulatory environment that you got to go through, not only with the U.S. Florida Department of Agriculture, but USDA and a lot of other things. So I think those are the things that I would say probably the biggest things that I would look out for. But you got to make sure you got products to sell.
Right, right. Now, what about reaching out to other farmers, like quote unquote locally, featuring their products in your store? Like, what
Yeah.
advice would you give there?
Oh yeah, I think any of these guys. I mean, right now, we have been partnering with some a local watermelon and vegetable farmer to
Hmm.
getting some of the vegetables there and get them into our store. Now we're not a produce market by any means, but when we got people that are our friends and our neighbors and they want us to sell those kind of things there, we've sold plums and peaches and a little bit of everything, anything that could. We got a pickle that some folks down around West Palm is buying raising their cucumbers and pickling them, and man, they're really good.
Hmm.
A little different. They got all kind of different flavors. So, yeah, I mean, people love to know where their products are coming from.
Oh
Used
yeah.
to when I was a kid, my grandfather, everybody knew a little bit about farming. Heck, most of the people that come in to our place now, they know nothing about farming or ranching except what we teach them.
Yeah, I feel like I've got this dream. Before I die, I want to open up a butcher shop because I think back in the old days, the butcher shop was such a great connection point between ranching and farming, or between ranching and the consumer. Do you think like farm stores are now kind of becoming the 21st century butcher shop where it's a better place for farmers and consumers to connect?
Yeah, I mean, if I went back and thought about the butcher shops that I've seen over the years, I bet I've seen 100 of them go out of business. And you
Mm,
say, well, what's the deal here? I mean, I think where we have the opportunity today versus what most people, and the reason why those guys may have went out of business, is you got to be more than just cutting up a piece of beef. You got to be able
Mm,
to say, okay, I've got grass-fed product, I've got prime, I've got choice, I've got different kinds I've got wagyu, I've got, just same thing with pork. I got different kinds of pork. I mean, I think you've got to give them something different than what they can just go to the grocery store and buy. If you're trying to compete with the Publix and the Winn-Dixies and the Walmarts of the world, you're not going to be very successful. They got more resources. Their costs are a lot less. So you got to find something that is your niche. And it's, you don't need to say, you're not going to have 200 stores open, but you might have a few
hmm.
as time goes on. But when you find that niche or whatever that is that the people around you want, then that's what you have to provide. That's one of the things is that we provide. We provide that local. We provide that person that wants to come in and see where this product came from, what it looks like from birth to harvest. We can show them that. If you want to, you can go on our website and you can see who we are and what we do. And there's a lot of things about that people really like in this day and time. And so I think, yes, maybe the new butcher shop may be the ranch, the
Mm,
store at the ranch,
yeah.
or a satellite store that's maybe in a larger metropolitan area, but it is a satellite of that ranch that's out there. So when you move that store to say Gainesville, in our particular case, you're actually moving the ranch out there that they can come in and see. So they got to see it. They can't just be walking in and buying beef.
Yeah, that's so cool. I mean, they can go there and buy their products, but also they can get a tour. They can see what's going on. So
Yeah,
it's not only it's extremely educational, which I think is so fun.
that's right. And
Do
and,
you?
and you got to have the people that's in the store that knows more about than just the big cuts of beef. They got to know what we do. You got to say, well, what are they doing over there to those cow? I can hear the cow pen over there. What are they doing? They say, oh, they're Craig checking the heifers this morning, or we're vaccinating our calves this morning, or whatever we're doing. And you can actually have that conversation and explain to these folks what's really going on out here. They can hear the sounds. They can see the cattle. They'll come up towards them if they walk out. You're taking pictures. I mean that gives them that interaction of feeling like yeah, I'm really at where this starts.
What do you think kind of drove that, where consumers are kind of more curious about where their food comes from? Like, it seems like, I don't know, the average consumer might be more curious and more, maybe a little bit more knowledgeable about, getting the information about who produced their food and where.
Well, I think it used to be, like I said earlier, I think it just used to be part of our legacy that we grew up on farms. We knew a little bit about this, and now people didn't really know. They never been to a ranch. They didn't know, but they're really interested and say, okay, I've got a steak here in front of me. What happened? How did that get here, and what was the process it caused
Mm.
to get here? Because they're concerned about their health, they're concerned about their family, and they don't have this inner knowledge that they grew up with. So now they need to go to the internet, and if you can give them a place like our ranch to come and look and see and experience it, it gives them a better feeling of what really is going on. Because there's been a lot of stuff out there, and some of it's true, some of it's not.
Hmm.
That your product is being kind of adulterated before it gets to the consumer. Maybe it's got preservatives, or maybe this, or maybe some of those things. No question are true. Some of them are not. But that consumer doesn't know the difference. So he likes to come see what really is happening.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, everybody, like, whether you're a farmer or consumer, like, you're on social media, you're seeing what's going on out there, and there's so many farmers and ranchers, and even just, like, I don't know, dietitians and stuff online sharing information, whether it's true or not, and consumers see it and they're like, well, hey, is this true or not? Can I find a farmer and ask about him? How many? I mean, this is kind of a ballpark answer.
Well, let me say something about
Yeah,
that
go ahead.
before we move on. We have what's called the Florida Beef Council,
Hmm.
and the Florida Beef Council is based in Kissimmee. And if you'll go on their website and you have any questions about, you know, anything about beef, whether it's how nutritious it is, how much iron it's got in it, what's the hormones in it, how does that affect you, do you want some recipes for beef? the Florida Beef Council is a great resource to go on with scientific data that will tell you
Mm.
exactly what it is. So it's not something that's just out there. You might have read on Facebook. This is really a scientific organizations that's put all this stuff together. So it is a great resource that anybody that wants to, and especially in Florida, can go to the Florida Beef Council website. And there's also people behind that. If you want to call and talk to someone, you pick up the phone. They're going to call you back if they're not there,
Hmm.
and they're going to tell you what you want to know about beef.
That's handy. I'm gonna look them up. I mean, I think
Yeah.
consumers are really dying to hear, like, I mean, stuff like that. Like, what are the hormones in beef? Like, what's the iron levels? Like, they want to know the really nitty gritty details on food and what they're eating, which I think is cool. Like, I think the normal consumer is more health conscious now than maybe in the past.
Yeah, I think so. They want to know more. They want to know more about what's going on. It's a great resource for you or for anybody that wants to know for the house, a person cooking dinner.
Hmm.
It's just a great resource. And it will tell you. You can go on there and look, and we always talk about hormones and stuff like this. It might be in cattle. There's probably more hormones in a potato or in some broccoli of some sort, than there is in a piece of meat that you may eat. So you can find some really cool kind of stuff that's in there that's really scientifically backed that kind of really puts some of this misinformation away.
I like that. Yeah, there's some graphic I saw like a year ago, and it's talking about the hormones in beef, and it
Yeah,
was saying like a steak has dramatically less hormones than like a piece of tofu, and you don't even
yeah,
think about
yeah.
that with tofu, and then you see it,
That's
you're
right.
like, oh my gosh, I don't need to worry about this at all for beef.
That's right. That's right. It's a lot of miscommunication going on there about that, and but the Florida Beef Council, great resource.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll have to look them up. I've heard about them vaguely, but I'll have to go and check them out, and maybe have to have
Yeah.
someone on the show from them. So you guys have the farm shop. You've got Quincy Cattle Company. Like, what is your whole process like? Of like, let's say I wanted to order a beef online and get it ordered. Like, what's that process look like on your end?
Yeah, well, if you go on our website and you go to our online store, you would pick out what you wanted, yeah, just like you would if you were going to Amazon, we will say, and you would put whatever you want in your shopping cart. You'd go out and check it out. Now, once you do that, there's a number of ways logistically to get that. The easiest one is we've got vans that go all over the state of Florida, and we're delivering to restaurants and a few small grocery stores and stuff like that. Restaurants primarily all over the state. So we're usually coming by your house within, fairly short, close proximity. We'll deliver it for free. You give us a $300 order or so. I can't remember the exact number, but we'll just bring it to your house. And so it's a real easy process. I can tell you that has been that part of our business that continues to grow every year.
That's awesome. And before I forget, like, do you guys offer any like full carcasses or full beef or half or quarter? Do y'all offer that as well?
We do, and we'll order if you want to order like a half or a quarter. We absolutely will. But what we will do that most, maybe some won't do,
Mm-hmm.
is you could come and say, okay, we want a quarter of a beef, and they say, well, that's approximately 200 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so we say, well, what do your family eat? I mean, what things do you like and what things do you not like? Well, we can mix and match and get you a quarter, get you that 200 pounds, let you take advantage of the pricing, but really sell you what you want of that carcass and not have to sell you things that you may end up feeding the dog in 2 or 3 years because it got freezer burnt.
Yeah.
You know, so those kind of things we can do, but we do sell halves and quarters, and we can do it in a lot of different ways.
That's super cool. That's really personable. I mean, instead of just like, giving them 70% ground beef and then,
Yeah,
some of that getting freezer burned.
that's right. Or we may have somebody that says, well, I never cook roast. I don't want any roast.
Yeah.
And say, okay, well, we'll take the roast out and we'll replace it with this. We try to replace it with something that's compatible price wise. And say, well, I don't want that, but I want this. It might be just a little bit of an upcharge to make, but at least you'll have stuff that you're going to utilize and eat, not something you're not going to eat.
Exactly. And now speaking of beef, you're going to eat. You guys have been kind enough to get me a picanha that my wife and I were going to pick up at the
Yes,
farm shop in a few weeks, and I'm super excited.
yeah,
That cooking video will go out after this interview. But
right.
what is your favorite cut, and then what is your favorite way to cook it? Because I mean, there are so many different ways to cook a steak. Like, what are your favorites?
Well, I'm gonna tell you, my favorite probably is a chuck roast,
Really?
and
Okay.
and cooked as a pot roast. And my wife is great at it. She's been cooking chuck roast, forever, and she does a really good job. She puts it in a crock. I mean, excuse me, not a crock pot, but a Dutch oven,
Mm.
and she cooks it for a long time, and it is just the most flavorful. It's comparable. The other probably next thing that is one of my favorite is a short rib. It could be a
Oh,
bone in or a
classic.
boneless short ribs. I love short ribs, but that's the kind of stuff I like. Of course, I love all kinds of stuff made with hamburger. I love
Hmm.
spaghetti, but those are probably my favorites. And I know that's a little bit different than a steak, but I like steak too. But if you gave me a pot roast or a steak, I'm probably going to take the pot roast.
I don't blame you. Okay, here are two wild curveballs. One, have you tried beef tongue before?
I have not tried beef tongue. I've
Okay,
tried. I've tried to talk myself into trying it, but
yeah.
I hadn't got that done. We have quite a few Hispanic folks that has worked for me over the years, and they just brag on how good they make tacos with beef tongue. I mean, it's
Hmm.
really good, and I mean it is like they go crazy when we harvest some right there at the farm, and they are able to get it. But I have not personally had it.
So it's not bad. I got a beef tongue from a friend of mine. She has an online marketplace for farmers and ranchers, and she sent me a beef tongue, and I did not want to try it, but I cooked it, and it wasn't bad. Like, you got to get past the look of the tongue, but you cook it. I think it's called like tacos de lengua, and yeah, it's very
Uh-huh.
popular in Spanish or in Mexico and Latin
Yeah.
America, and it's good. It's not bad at all. You just like
Yeah.
boil it, you pressure cook the tongue for like 2 hours, and then you cut it up. You remove all the skin, and then by the time
Right.
you eat it, it looks normal, and it tastes actually pretty good. So it's not bad.
Yeah. Yeah, they'd really love it. Folks that like it really like it.
That's a good one. You'll have to try it. Let me know. Let me know how it
I
is.
will. I will try it one day.
Add it to the list.
Yeah, that's
Well,
one day.
well, Don, this has been awesome learning about you guys at Quincy Cattle Company. If people are obviously if they're in Chiefland, they can stop by the farm store, the beef shop. People can go to Quincy Cattle Company. Where else can they kind of follow you guys and just kind of see what you're doing and even buy from you?
We're on Facebook, and we're probably on Facebook every day doing specials and stuff like that, and and you'll see us on TikTok occasionally. So we've got some followings there. But if you want to buy something from us, either come see us, go on our website, and you can get to our website from Facebook if you'd like. However you prefer, and you could communicate directly. I mean, call. You can send us email. We got or a text. All of that stuff is on the internet. So we got lots of ways to communicate. And our whole deal, to be honest with you, our whole marketing for ever since we got into the beef business has been internet marketing. Through
Mm.
primarily Facebook. I mean, I'm an old school guy. I don't know much about all that, but it has been really has what we market our product mostly. But
Well,
we
thank.
go all over, and we're in restaurants and all over. We go down as far as Fort Lauderdale and as north of Jacksonville, and then from Steinhatchee to just south of Tampa. So you might be in a restaurant and be eating Quincy Cattle Company products.
Hey, well, there you go. Yeah, I'm so glad you guys are doing what you're doing, and thank you for your transparency and just kind of sharing what you guys are doing. I was a former Florida state officer, and Ronnie Simmons, who works at Florida FFA, he posted a picture eating some Quincy cattle, and I was like, all right, I need to find Quincy cattle and have them on the podcast. So that's how I learned about you guys. But
Well,
yeah,
Hunter, I may have told you this before, but Hunter, my stepson, he is a regional state officer today,
no
and
way.
so
Okay.
they're having their convention. Let's see, not next week, but the following week. So
Yep.
that's where we'll be with his outgoing presentations. Hunter's a great kid, and he has the FFA's been awful good for him and to him.
That's awesome. It's a wonderful organization. My wife and I will be there Thursday and Friday, so we'll have to look for you.
Well,
I
absolutely,
haven't
we'll
been in
definitely be
years.
there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I'll look for
we'll
you
be
there.
there.
But Don, it was great to virtually meet you. Thanks so much for what you're doing, and I'll send as many people I can your way.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me. And don't forget, you remind people to go to the Florida Beef Council website if they need to find out anything just about beef.